very important, and it's very personally important to me. And it happened June 26, 2015. Now, it caused a lot of big fuss, and a lot of people had their own opinions about it. A lot of people had their own ideas about it. But basically, it's the same-sex marriage law. And it got passed due to a court case called Lawrence versus Texas. Now, why this is important to me personally is because, well, this gentleman right here is my uncle. Now, my uncle is a homosexual man, and he's possibly one of the best men that I know. Now, for the first 12 to 13 years of my life, he helped raise me. And he taught me all my values, he taught me everything that I needed to know about life and how to succeed in it. And he did that because my parents, they were going through a messy divorce, and basically he stepped up to kind of take care of me and my sister. Now, also, my sister is also bisexual, and she currently has a girlfriend. And this is important to me personally because I love her, and this is something that's important to her personally. Now, this is his husband. They just recently got married 2 years ago after the law got passed. This is my Uncle Brian here, and he's another great person that I know. Now, why this is so important, especially for the LGBT community, is because, well, let me ask you a question. If you ever had a husband or a wife, or if you were in a hospital situation, okay, they're deathly ill, they're on their hospital bed. Now, if you get to make decisions because you're married to them. I should know I'm married, I know what that's like. So, but up until this law got passed, you weren't allowed to do that. So if you were homosexual in any kind of way, now, if your husband or your spouse or your partner or anything got deathly ill and you were by their side, you weren't allowed to make any decisions for them whatsoever. This is very controversial because basically you have no rights to your partner. You have no rights to what they own. You have no rights to anything. So this law basically made it to where you guys, if you're homosexual, have rights. You have any rights that of a heterosexual couple. Now, the three main points that I want to make today are that same-sex marriage does not harm the institute of marriage, that children of the LGBT community and the same-sex couples don't really get affected by this law, but in a positive way. Now, the third one is that using religion to deny same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. Now, these are the three big misconceptions that I hear about gay marriage, that, you know, it affects the institute, and it corrupts the children, you know, and then, of course, the big one where you use religion to kind of, you know, deny them that. Now, like I said, if you were sick, if your partner was sick, they weren't allowed to make any kind of decisions for you. They weren't allowed to your property. They weren't allowed until this law got passed. Made them completely equal with heterosexual couples. Now, let me put this into perspective for you. There are 9.2 million homosexual couples, LGBT, people who consider themselves transsexual, anything like that, living in the United States. That's 3.5% of the U.S. population. Now, that's a huge number, and let me put this into perspective for you. That's the exact same amount as North Carolina's population. That's the entire state of North Carolina in the United States that consider themselves either gay, transgender, bisexual, anything like that. Now, that's a huge number. That's everybody living in North Carolina. Now, so obviously this law affects a lot of people. Now, my first point is that, you know, this does not affect the institute of marriage. Well, before this law got passed, the divorce rate was up to 50% of all marriages end in divorce. That's first-time marriages. Second-time marriages end, 67% of second-time marriages end in divorce. And third even goes higher than that, goes up to 73% of third-time marriages end in divorce. And that was before this law got passed. Now, when this law did get passed, it didn't affect the rate at all. It stayed right there at 50%. So said the American Psychological Association. Now, I'll be using them a lot in this presentation because they have done a lot of studies, especially since this has been going on. Now, according to JAMA Pediatric Journal, for teens mostly, especially if they're part of the LGBT community, they feel outcast, they feel neglected. You know, they don't know how to do it because our society doesn't really accept them for who they are. And actually, this law does a lot of good for teen rates, because the suicide rate for LGBT teens dropped 14% in 2 years. That's a huge number. Since this law got passed, 14% of teen suicides went down because of this law. As a matter of fact, JAMA Pediatric Journal did a study of 700 teens. Now, 230 of those teens considered themselves part of the gay community. Now, 2/3 of them considered suicide at least twice a week. And 2/3 of them have even attempted it. Now, the American Psychological Association also did a study showing that parents of a LGBT family, if you want to call it, they say that actually the scientific bias concluding that homosexual mothers and fathers are not, or there's no basis to conclude that they're unfit to be parents. As a matter of fact, they saw that actually they're just as well adjusted as heterosexual children from heterosexual homes. And they're more well adjusted, they have better attitudes, and actually it proves that they also are not sexually confused about their sexuality or the roles of the mother and the father. Now, the unconstitutional part of this about the religion, the U.S. Constitution states that no law will be made by Congress respecting an establishment of religion, which means that they can't pass a law that has religion in mind, so they can't turn down this law based on religious ideals or anything like that. So to turn down this law would be completely unconstitutional. And the think tank that I saw up, the Williams Institute, even said that same-sex marriage bans are unconstitutional under the case file Lawrence v. Texas, which is the case file that actually approved this whole law. Now, I would like to just say to a few of you that if you have, there's most likely, there's a friend, there's a family member, there's somebody that you know that is either gay or considers them gay. Maybe you don't know, maybe they're too afraid to tell you, but this definitely applies to you, because you may know someone who's gay, or maybe you don't. Maybe they're keeping it from you, maybe they're afraid of how you'll act, but the important thing is that this law is important because it affects everybody, heterosexuals and homosexuals. It doesn't just affect one group. And I would implore you, if you do have a gay friend or family member, think about how this affects them and how this, how their happiness is important and how you want them to live out the rest of their life. I would implore you to think about those things the next time you think about this law. Thank you.
Does
anyone have any questions?
I'll throw one out there.
Yeah.
So do you think, you mentioned that your sister is gay as well, and you don't think that has no bearing on your uncle bringing her up?
No.
Or is the influence of being gay, whether she's in a hetero household and like going to church and stuff like that?
Well, see, the thing is that for the first few years we lived with him, and he helped take care of us, and then we went back to our father. Now, our father was a very Christian person. He was a very, biblical type person. So, he'd take us to church all the time, and he would do that. So, actually, I don't think it had any effect on her in terms of that. I mean, she felt more comfortable around my uncle than she did my father for obvious reasons. He was a little bit more accepting of her. And my sister has always kind of known that she was attracted to the opposite sex, especially when she hit puberty and stuff like that. But at that point, we had stopped living with my uncle, and during the, and when we lived with him, it was kind of normal to see him with my uncle, my other Uncle Brian, and just to kind of, that was normal for us. We weren't confused or anything, because if that's true, I would be gay, and I'm not. So, I mean, it's just, I think, of who she is and who she wanted to be. And even though we grew up in a heterosexual household, after that, it still didn't change her at all. Yeah.
So one of the biggest arguments for people who are like Christians against same-sex marriage is that marriage is ordained by God.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would your comment be on that? Because that's like in direct violation of the Bible.
Okay. Well, I mean, honestly, I think that's a little bit of another argument by itself. And but I would tell you this: I don't consider the Bible to be any kind of authority on morality in any way, shape, or form. And I say that because the Bible also states, and you can look this up, that if, say, for example, your mother was to wear 2 different types of garments, you're allowed to burn her alive. It also states that if your neighbor works on Sunday, you're allowed to stone him to death. So I would say that not to take something like that at its literal value, and because before even the Bible came along, homosexuality was actually pretty well established through certain parts of the world and certain parts of the culture.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Do what now?
There's nothing new under the sun. That's in the Bible. So that's what I'm saying. Like.
And I would say that I wouldn't use the Bible as a source of any kind of information
So
or
you don't
morality.
believe in the Bible.
No.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is a federal court that decided all this. Shouldn't it be up to individual states to regulate? I mean, even let's say marriage is not a religious institution, it is the bedrock of civilization between a man and a woman. For most history, but there's some pockets of gay marriage, but most civilization. So why shouldn't each individual state get to decide? Why is the federal government saying you have to allow it?
Well, because I think also because, like I said before, it is unconstitutional under our Constitution that we can't. That basically the only argument that is being made towards gay marriage is a religious one, and it says that we can't make a law that establishes any law under a religious banner. Now, in terms of like this individual states doing this, well, most states, actually quite a few states, were approving it before the federal level was approving it. They basically were just kind of giving it a nudge forward and just saying, okay, well, then all states have it. I mean, I know some states were very much against it, including this one and a few of the other southern states. I think Alabama was really against it. But it definitely, I think it's just because it was unconstitutional, so they decided to step in.
Well, Mark's already asked one, but
Yeah,
no,
that's what I was
this part,
thinking.
but
I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Okay, do you believe that like having the same-sex experience would affect like their child if they want to have religious views? Do you think that would have any kind of
Like if the
like say the kid wants to be like Christian, like hardcore Christian, but the parents don't believe in that? Do you think that would be like an issue in the family?
like if the child wanted to be.
Yeah, say the child wants to go to church, but the parents aren't, they don't.
No, I don't think so, because my uncle's, Uncle Brian, he has a daughter in his first marriage, and actually she's a Christian, but obviously she accepts her dad and she lives with her dad, and she accepts both of them for who they are. I think there are some people that can be religious and get past that aspect and can understand that, to come up with their own moral code, their own moral values and stuff like that, and just kind of like bypass that part of it. I know you can hold your hand up.
So in the early 1900s, it was considered a mental disorder. People would be treated. But do you think that has anything to relate with the suicide rate being quite high?
Actually, I'll explain to you like this. For years, for decades, for quite a while, we have socially made this unacceptable for a very long time. Now, it was considered an illness because, again, it was tied to a religious aspect. They saw it as a perversion of the human mind and stuff like that. So basically anyone that had any kind of homosexual tendencies, they just kicked into a mental institution and left them there. Now, I would explain that because it's become socially unacceptable for so long, that it has isolated a lot of people that have felt like, you know, what they feel inside is wrong and perverted. So they can't live with that, and some of them are even religious, and so they feel like that kind of violates their religion to feel how they feel. So by doing so, they kind of, you know, take their own life and take that into their own hands. I would say that our suicide rate has a lot to do with social unacceptance rather than mental illness. Because now, as you just saw, because it's becoming more acceptable to be gay, that the suicide rates are dropping. Things are changing. You see more gay characters on TV. You see them in movies. You see them. It's becoming more socially acceptable, which changes our minds and perceptions of that.
So that's 20 minutes, but we're short. We're gonna have to.
The biggest argument I've heard to this law is that marriage is a religious term. So just the separation of church and state, because I would be all for, I mean, I'm not against gay marriage, but just that it makes some people that believe the same things I believe think differently in that it's a religious term. While, is there a way that we can give them the same rights as people who are married without making it have to be religious, such as like a union? I mean, something like that. Would you agree to that?
Well, yeah, we could just make marriage not religious at all. We could just dump that all together.
Well, like keep the religious, be
Well,
religious.
I mean,
So
well,
have
you know,
marriage
some
and
people
then have something else
have
called.
like a
Well,
civil
see, if we
union where they
do
can
that,
have
we might
some-
also be isolating them as well, saying that they're not the same as us, so therefore, what if a gay couple is religious? You know, what if, you know, like it's a Jewish gay couple or something like that, by telling them that...
I don't know about their, is it a Torah or what is it? Sorry, okay, laugh at me.
No, no,
But
that's
that
a good
marriage
point.
is between a man and a woman, so if they were of that, then, and they believed in the Bible, I'm not saying that they wouldn't believe in the Bible just because they're gay, but that according to the Bible they believed in, it would be marriage is a man and a woman. So,
Well,
And you can't pick and choose
can't pick and choose.
what you believe in.
Well, actually, I would...
If you believe in the
dis-
Bible, you believe in the whole thing, you don't just believe in parts of it.
That just
That is not true.
That just makes
But-
it sound so stupid.
I don't want to turn this into a religious. Let's not get into that.
But,
We don't have
I have
enough time to go
nothing
there.
against
Okay, well, to answer her question,
Okay, answer real quick.
just real quick to answer your question, I think that by separating them and calling them something else would, again, be isolating them, which wouldn't really fix the problem. Now, but not all, you know, gay couples are Christian. You know, some of them are Jewish, some of them are, you know, they're whatever. You know, there's even Muslim gay couples, which is kind of weird on its own because, like you said, their religion denies that completely. But there are others that have different religions that want their marriage to be considered religious, that their religion doesn't consider gay marriage to be an abomination or anything else. So that's just something else that just kind of isolates them.
We could go on a while, right?
We could.
Oh, yeah,
Actually, I've heard a lot of speeches on that over the years. I think you had one of the best ones, just because the way you refuted every argument, and you had this big source up there. Like,